Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 69 of the Authentic Leadership Podcast. I am your host, accredited coach CC Ojany-Bekhor. This is the fourth in the Unusual Conversation series. Thank you so much for all of you who've been tuning in. We've really loved your messages. For those of you who are not sure what exactly I'm talking about, maybe this is the first episode you're tuning into. I am here with two fellow coaches, Jane K, Caroline G, fellow coaches, very good friends of mine. And we've been having quote unquote unusual conversations around topics such as life purpose, intimate relationships, parenting. And what happened was we were having these conversations amongst ourselves, and I had this idea, hey, why don't we share this with the world? Because when we talk to each other, we get so many insights. We're learning so much from each other, and I don't believe such things should be kept hidden or hoarded. And I know you, dear listeners, have certainly been enjoying the conversations as well. Both men and women have been tuning in, which I'm really happy about. Mercy, for example, said about the parenting episode, I loved every bit of this conversation. I was listening to it while getting ready for work, and I'm going to have to listen to it all over again. Thank you so much, ladies. Laura said the same thing. She's like, wow, love this. I was actually at a party on Saturday, the Saturday before today's episode, and I had a whole conversation with a gentleman about the episodes as well. He's been tuning in, and he has so many questions he'd like to ask, which is why Jane, Caroline, and I will also let you know about some live sessions, because we would love to engage with you guys. Now, as usual, we are not here to preach. Take what you resonate with, discard the rest. Maybe what we say will resonate with you months or years from now. That has certainly been the case for me. I know it's the same for Jane and Caroline as well. We have had conversations about this where you will listen to something, it will not make sense, but a few years later, it makes complete sense. So we are not here to preach. We are not here to be prescriptive. We are just three women, three coaches. We are sharing our experiences, sharing our insights, and all we hope is that you, dear listeners, get insights as well. Jane, Caroline, so good to have you here, ladies. How are you this morning?
Awesome.
Well. Yeah.
Good. And for those listeners who are overseas, again, not that it matters, but we all happen to be based in Nairobi. We work with clients of different cultural backgrounds. Caroline, what do you do? How do you do it? And who do you do it with?
Wow. I am a transformation coach, and I see myself as a midwife because I help people bring forth new identities, because to get over a challenge or to get to a goal, you definitely need to be a different person with new thought patterns and new emotional patterns. And that's what I help people do. And the way I do it is it's conversational. So I use some coaching techniques. I also do a little bit of energy work to just shift emotional states. And I work with anybody who is tired with the status quo and they just want to be in a new space. Yeah. So that's me, Sissy.
Thank you so much for that, Caroline. And it's also really great that you do the energy work as well. For our dear listeners, coaching and talk therapy are very powerful. They help you get insights, but it's important to be aware that your body is holding memories. Our bodies are impacted by everything we've been through. If you do any sort of reading around trauma, you will know that trauma experts are now saying that trauma is in the body. So it also helps to get in your body and engage with body modalities. And this is an energy work is one such modality. Thank you so much, Caroline. What about you, Jane? What do you do? Who do you do it with? And how do you do it?
Well, just like Caroline, I like to see myself as a mirror. So why do I like to see myself as a mirror? Because I believe in life. I'm a life and wellness coach. And as a mirror, I like to see I like to tell my clients that there are events in life, and then the stories we tell about those events. And what I bring to focus is that those stories that we create about the event are what then determine how we live our lives. But when we are able to see the stories and how we created them, we are able to set ourselves free from things that happened that are still controlling our lives. To put it boldly, a story has an agenda. And it's, when I take you through the coaching sessions, which are conversational, I help you to see that once what happened, you created a story around it. You built something that didn't exist, but it was your interpretation of what happened. And I'm able to help you deconstruct that so that you can go back to the space where you started and you're able now to create something different that is empowering for your life.
That's amazing, Jane, and so powerful, because we will be looking into this in today's episode, which is loving the tough times. How can you start loving the tough times? Well, a big part of it is, what is the narrative, the story you've told about that tough experience that you had? For those of you who don't know me, I'm Cece Ojany-Bekhor. I work as an executive leadership and wellness coach. Simply put, I help you solve your personal and professional challenges. You can go to themainprotagonist.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, CECEOJANY. Have a read. I share lots and lots of free content about what I do and how I do it. So let's get right into it, ladies. And by the way, for the listeners, once again, we have not rehearsed this conversation. We didn't do a dry run. Sometimes we get as surprised as you guys about what comes out of our mouths. But rest assured that what comes out of our mouths is certainly true for us, how we feel. So this is certainly not a performance podcast where everybody's just being perfect. We're just being ourselves. So when it comes to loving the tough times, ladies, I thought we would start with our childhoods. Some people are tired of hearing about childhood this, childhood that. But it's a key location of how we feel about and how we approach our tough times. Carolyne, I'd love to hear from you. What is the purpose of tough times, and why is life sometimes so difficult when we're younger, at childhood? What are your thoughts on that?
It's very interesting how it all is going back to purpose.
Yes.
That
would be episode 60. Yeah.
I'm glad we started with that conversation, because it's like everything, if you don't get that, then everything else will not make sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, if you're going to the coast, for example, and that's why the direction and the path and the means of going there will make sense, because you have already set the destination. So what I say is, in the course of my life, the purpose of hard times or difficult times was different because of where I was at in relation to my definition or even my awareness of purpose. Without the conversation of purpose, it can all seem like a bad joke.
Yeah.
There's some sadist out there, especially with a religious orientation.
Yeah.
It can get really confusing, because you're like, this loving God, this put us in this place, and it's just making us go through all these things for what?
Yes. Yes.
It will not make sense until you have had that conversation of purpose. Now, having arrived at my definition of purpose at this point in my life, everything falls into place. It's like I am seeing how the pieces are clicking together.
Yes.
And how I must have gone through what I went through for me to be here.
Yeah.
Like, I begin to understand there is no other way, because for me, the hard times and the good times all have one purpose: to build awareness. So
Yeah.
it really doesn't matter whether the times are hard or the times are not hard.
Yeah.
It's about what awareness am I getting about myself, about who to be,
Mm-hmm.
about the direction and the purpose of my life from this scenario.
From this experience.
Yeah, case
Yeah.
in point for me has been my experience with depression.
Yeah.
When I look back at it, I'm like, wow, it was so necessary for me to be here where I was. But
Yeah.
now, as you know, we spoke before we started this conversation, I was telling you guys, I have been through very many tough times, but I've never had such a conversation that we're having today of how can I best go through hard times.
Yeah.
I've just found myself on the other side of the hard times.
You
And
just
so I'm
find
like,
yourself, yeah. Yeah.
let's see
Yeah.
what this conversation has for me. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the good things about not prepping for this call, because the call remains interesting and true for even the three of us,
Yeah.
which adds to it. You know, Caroline, what
Yeah.
you've said is so interesting because, excuse me, this is the rationale for a lot of atheists. The
Mhm.
idea of a God out there is absolutely ridiculous to many of them because of just how tough life can get,
Yeah.
individually and collectively. And I've
Mm,
coached atheists. I've coached people from all religious backgrounds, including atheists. Um,
mm,
and it's always quite interesting. But I like what you're saying. If you don't orient towards there must be a reason this is happening, it
yeah.
becomes some random awful stuff, really.
And then Cece, also it's about we have this culture of deciding that the tough times have a different purpose than the good times. So it's like we create a judgment around the tough times and
Yeah.
we don't want them, you see.
Yeah.
So when you're with that mindset, then it's like you're rationalizing. So you're not really even going through the times
Yeah.
with appreciation and gratitude. You're just rationalizing to numb down the pain of
Yeah.
those times. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We're gonna delve deeper into that. Well, what does it mean if we can take both the good times and the tough times just as they are? And
Yeah.
it is a skill. It is a skill. You have to be an incredibly wise teenager, for example, to be at this place. And I'm sure there's some amazing teenagers that are out there, but it's definitely a skill, I would say. What about you, Jane? What are your thoughts around the tough times and what is the purpose of them all? And especially this question of, there's some pretty yucky times in childhood for a lot of people. What are your thoughts on that?
Where I'm at today and where I was before, very different. When I went through those hard times, I just felt like the world was against me. I just felt like I came to earth to just suffer, to just, life just seemed just everywhere I looked, just felt so hard. And I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why I was going through such hard times. And there were, when I look at the hard times and the good times, there were fewer good times than there were hard times. In fact, most of the things I remember were the hard times.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't make sense.
Your childhood, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they didn't make sense. And
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Look, like Caroline said, I was asking, okay, so we're told there's a God who loves us. And here we are going through all this. We have parents who love us. Why do I have to struggle so hard? But now in hindsight, after I've gotten to where I'm at, when we look at purpose, when we look at just the growth of experience in my life, I'm like, if I had not gone through that, I'm not sure any of this that is happening right now would have made sense. I'm not even sure I would have been a coach today, where I'm at today, because it's through those hard times that certain things have opened up for me. I've gotten awareness. That's how I got to see what I called hard times really emanated from the stories I told about the events that happened.
Yeah.
Stuff happened in life, but then I had different stories. And now I can look back and see, even with my siblings, we probably went through the same things, but my response or my reaction to the events were very, very different. And that's based on the stories that I told rather than their stories. So when I look, but when I now look at it and I'm understanding that everything happens for a reason, I can see just what every one of those hard times really helped me opened up something for me, that I was able to see certain possibilities that were not there in life. I'm able to see people, even just looking at people, I'm able to see them from a very different light.
Yes. You
rather than
develop empathy and
empathy,
compassion when you've been through some tough times. I have this joke I always say, hard to have an insight when you're relaxing, having a great time on the beach.
Yes.
You can look at the ocean and go, wow, that's so amazing. And I'm so grateful and I'm so thankful. But it ends there. You know what I mean? And often having your cocktail. But when you have tough times is when, oh man, some gems of
and even and not even also not jumping quickly into judgment. Because like I've been there. Oh, that's my story. Oh, that one. I experienced that. So I see that it helps us, through our life's journey. It's able to help us open up and become aware of certain things, which ordinarily, if we hadn't gone through that, I'm not sure reading it in a book would have made sense. Some of these things we really needed to go through.
And you certainly have such I mean, both of you really, but particularly you, Jane, you have such a big heart. Like you're able to have so much empathy and compassion, even for people you don't know. So for example, for our listeners, you might not know this, but in Kenya, for example, during the post-election violence all those years ago, Jane took herself to some of those meetings and locations to help. And you have to be incredibly grounded and incredibly big-hearted to do something like that, because most people just want to hide in the safety of their homes, which is totally understandable as well. It's interesting, ladies, but a lot of the coaches I know personally, we all have something in common. We've all been through some stuff. And I believe that is what enables us to do our job well. There are people out there who think, I can just be a coach. But if number one, you're not patient, if number two, you're not compassionate, if number three, you're not understanding, if number four, you're non-judgmental, you're gonna have a pretty hard time being a coach, because you are swimming in humanity and humanity's stories as a coach. That is what we do all day, every day. So you need some strength to be able to handle that. So just some food for thought out there for anyone thinking of being a coach. It may look easy, but it takes a lot. It takes a lot. Ladies, for me, the tough times, again, like you, I've come to realize that the tough times are here to help me elevate. When I was growing up, I felt quite lonely, and I'm working on my memoirs at the moment. Hopefully they'll be, not hopefully, I'm pretty sure I'll release them next year. And it was such a powerful experience because reflecting on one's life is a very enlightening experience. It's hindsight, looking at things in hindsight, looking at things differently. But if I was to rewind the tape, put myself in a time machine, take myself back to my childhood, I grew up feeling quite lonely, which is really ironic because I have 5 siblings and I had 2 parents at that time. And it's not because anyone did anything wrong. My siblings were older, they're out and about, having fun with their friends. My parents are from a particular generation. They're such amazing people. But things like personal development and let me tell you about my feelings, and that's not a conversation I had with them. Now, to be fair, I didn't ask them if I could have that conversation with them. So who knows? Maybe something interesting could have happened. But I grew up feeling lonely. And add to that I'm quite sensitive. And by sensitive, I don't mean I burst into tears every 2 minutes. By sensitive, I mean I am the sort of person who I can walk into a room And if there's been a fight in that room, I will be able to sense it. My body can sense it. My body senses things about people. If you are, I remember once, I think I shared this in one of the previous episodes. I was in a meeting when I was living and working in Australia. I was fine. It was an exco meeting. I'd been to it so many times. But there was a new lady who had joined, and she was now in that meeting. And she sat next to me, and all of a sudden I started feeling nervous. And I asked myself, why am I feeling nervous? This is so weird. And I turned to look at her, and she had very fair skin. She's an Anglo lady. And I immediately realized, oh my God, I'm picking up on her nervousness. I'm picking up on her nervousness. So that's what I mean when I say I'm sensitive. Now, I'm a kid. I'm very young. I'm feeling quite lonely. I'm feeling quite distressed about, things like the little white lies that have been told to me about various things and by various people. And that turned into anger in my early 20s. And I became this person who was just really angry, especially with my mom, a kind of, why aren't you better at looking after me emotionally? You looked after me physically, materially, but why aren't you better at looking after me emotionally? And for a long time, I was just churning in that turmoil. In Kenya here, as in many countries, there's also that focus on education. So a lot of people feel that our intellectual selves are being prioritized, but every other part of ourselves is being forgotten. And as adults, you grow up and realize, oh my God, I'm kind of lopsided. I'm out of balance. And the thing is, when you're a kid, you don't know any of this. So it's just so hard. And that's why for me, I say to people, I'm going to pay for my daughter to get coaching. I don't want her to be 35 and realizing, oh, something's wrong. Let me talk to someone. Like, I would love to just tell her, hey, look, there's going to be ups and downs in life. You can talk to Auntie so-and-so. You can talk to Auntie Jane. You can talk to Auntie Caroline. You can talk to whoever.
Yeah.
But I would love to just pay for you to get a coach, because there's also that understanding that she might not be too happy with some of the choices I've made. And that's just the nature of parenting. Go to the parenting episode, everyone. But when you're a kid, it's so tough. And ladies, please feel free to share only what you're comfortable to share. But like with you, Jane, what were those tough times like when you were young and you didn't have the money, the means, or the wisdom that you have today?
Tell you what, Sissy. Even as I thought about this conversation in the morning, just getting ready for it, I was just thinking, tough times. The one thing I truly do remember is I never had permission to feel.
Yeah.
It's like what I felt was not important. Something would happen and I want to share what I'm going through. Before I even finish that sentence, either I'd be slapped or just to be told to keep quiet. I wasn't allowed to feel. And for me, that was really tough, because I now see that I'm a very expressive person, but I was never allowed to express how I felt, and that was one of the hardest ones, feeling just like I have siblings, but feeling like I was alone, feeling like nobody understood me, feeling like they seem to have a party going on there. I'm not part of it.
Yeah.
And I want to ask so many questions, but every time I ask a question, my mother thought I was questioning what she was saying rather than, I was questioning her rather than what she's saying. So even when I asked, I'll be so scared because I got hit a few times for asking questions. It's like, listen, you're here, what I say you do, and that's it. And I'm not here to fault her, to blame her. That's how she knew how to do things.
Yeah.
No, but that for me was the hardest, just not being able to feel, not being allowed, it's like I had no permission to feel. I'm feeling all these things. And that then made me create a lot of anger, a lot of resentment towards certain people, certain things.
Yes.
I just didn't like it. And then also being the darkest in the family, being singled out by everyone who came to the family, to the home, and they'll keep asking, why is she so dark? Is she really yours? Things like that. Insensitive, people will ask.
For our
Wow.
listeners, Jane is talking about her complexion. It's that colorism
Yes.
thing that
Yes,
happens
it's a
with
colorism
brown
thing.
family.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want you to lose your train of thought, Jane, but just really quickly, what you've said here, that thing of, why don't my parents understand me? Isn't that what every tween and teen thinks? Maybe not every, but certainly most. Tricky times. But yes, go on, Jane.
So I singled out all the time, and I started feeling different. And therefore I started acting different.
Yeah.
I was very surprised when my dad passed on and we were looking for photos to put in his program, for the eulogy and all. I was surprised because everybody asked me, Jane, you don't appear in any of these photos. And I realized from when I just never belonged there. I would take off. I didn't like photos. I never belonged. So that for me was it. Never felt that sense of belonging. I always felt like I did this, I didn't identify here, and therefore there are certain things I would have wanted to, experience or ask, but I wouldn't because I don't belong. So that was hard. And most importantly is not being able to feel like I have the permission to feel the pain, to feel,
to feel.
Just to feel, yes.
Just to feel. I remember being, excuse me, in my late 20s, when, researching and getting coaching, just understanding concepts like anger is not a bad thing. If you suppress it, it can become depression because it turns inward.
Yeah.
Or it becomes rage when you express it outwardly. And simple things like this that we don't know as children, we're not taught. But you see, our parents and our caregivers also probably didn't know, because if they did, they would have helped us out.
Definitely.
So, it's also interesting for those of you whose parents are still around, I want to encourage you to ask your parents about their childhoods, if they're comfortable to talk about it. Because one thing leads to another, generational patterns get passed down, etc., etc. Carolyne, what about you? What about you and your childhood?
So for me, there are two different ways I have experienced hard times.
Yeah.
So in one way, I have been present to it, like in that moment, becoming aware of how hard this moment is and this situation is. And then the other way of looking back and saying, wow, that was hard, like after the fact. It's like somehow I dissociated and I'm like, I look back and I'm like, how did I survive that? It's like I didn't have an awareness in that moment how hard it was. So I have, like in my childhood, I was parentified. So I had a lot of responsibility that were beyond me. Like taking care of the home, taking care of my siblings. And I remember we had this thing of like, there are no dishes that are going to sleep unwashed. I had to do the washing of the dishes every night. And I remember just crying hot, bitter tears every night there because everyone is going to bed. I'm tired. It's like I'm not allowed to be tired. I'm not allowed to not feel like it. I'm not allowed to ask for help. It's my responsibility and it's my responsibility. And I remember feeling so helpless, feeling so angry, but having nowhere to express it.
And not
and
having
feeling
the words.
Yeah, like I
Parental
couldn't
fight is
even
a word
try.
you discovered later.
Yeah.
Parental
Of
fight,
course.
yeah, is a word you discovered later. That's the catch-22 about being a kid. You don't even have the language or the frameworks.
And I remember Cece thinking that I could feel how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And I remember it being so tough, but I didn't ever think that there was something wrong with that dynamic until
Yes.
my auntie came one day and I had her asking my mom, like, why is she doing all this work? And she was like, you're going to make her stunt, like having stunted growth
Right.
in my mother tongue. So
Yeah.
she told her, you're going to get her stunted. And I remember that made it even more painful for me, because I was like, then if it is wrong, if it's not supposed to happen, why are they making me do it?
Yes. Yes.
And I remember it being about, like for children, for your own survival, you idealize your parents,
Yes.
you
Yes.
idealize your caregivers for your own sense of safety,
Yeah.
security, and survival.
Yeah.
And so, so I remember it becoming now about me. Kwani, what's wrong with me? Because it cannot be
Yes.
about my parents. It cannot be
Yes.
about them.
There's something wrong with me. Caroline,
Yeah.
don't lose your train of thought. Please don't lose your train of thought. But we have to pause the conversation here because this is so important. So many young kids make it about there must be something wrong with me. I shouldn't feel this way. I know I
Yeah.
certainly did that. I
Yeah.
shouldn't feel this way. And that just creates a whole other few years of internal conflict.
Oh, yeah.
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 But please carry on, Carolyn. So you're there going, well, they wouldn't do that to me. There must be something wrong with me. And
There
then,
must be something wrong with me, and me not being able to contain what I'm feeling
yeah,
and not having a place to express it. So my only place of expressing it was at the sink at night. And even then, I would have to cry silently, because if I cry and somebody gets to know I'm crying, then that will be another problem.
yeah, yep,
So it was tough. It was really, really tough. And the thing that made it tough, and this is what I would like the listeners to understand,
yeah,
that the reason why any time is tough, the reason why the times are tough, it's always because you have made it to mean something about you.
Yourself, yeah.
yeah. And here's the thing, right? Oh, I'm so excited for our listeners because this is gonna be a huge insight, I'm sure. So
Yeah.
understand the pattern, dear listeners. See the breadcrumbs. You're a kid. Something happens. You're uncomfortable. You're distressed. You're unhappy. It makes you tense. It makes you uncomfortable. Fill in the blanks. Most kids
Yeah.
don't then say, nah, family meeting, I'm not okay with this, let's discuss. And even if you did, your parents would probably burst out laughing and tell you, I don't think so, right? So
Yeah.
then you make it mean there must be something wrong with me. And that, ladies, gentlemen,
Exactly.
everyone in between, that is where the disorders begin.
Yeah.
So for me,
Yeah.
because people were so busy living their lives, hanging out with their friends and doing their things, remember what we said in the parenting episode, our parents have lives. And for our listeners overseas, life in Kenya is not easy. This is not Luxembourg or Australia, where if you don't have a job, you can just go to the government and you'll get a healthy chunk of money. This is Kenya. So people work really, really hard. There's a sense of I've got to work hard or I really won't survive. So for me, because people aren't hanging out with me as much as I would like, I make it mean there must be something wrong with me. Am I boring? Am I not interesting enough? Do my opinions not matter? And then I grow up, and in my early 20s, I'm this person who, this kind of conversation we're having right now, ladies, if I was in my early 20s and we were sitting around somewhere, all I would do is listen to the two of you without sharing my experience. Because I silenced myself. My opinion must not matter. Right? And so Cece develops a reputation for being a very good listener, but at the same time, people are like, but she's also so private, but we also can't figure her out. So that was consequence number one. Consequence number two was I started having problems with the emotion of sadness. And so I became the happy girl. So I would go to school, and in school, I would express the happy side of myself. I was the one of the class comedians. Yeah. Everybody develops a persona in school. For me, it's comedian. Yeah. Miss Congenial. Anyone, yeah, get along with many people. Or when you're around CC, you laugh, what have you, what have you. It's a consequence of how I felt at home. And it was only in my late 20s when I started to unpack all this. And there are so many personalities I have met. It's so funny, but in Australia, where I lived for so many years, in Kenya, there's a persona. I call them Mr. and Miss Entertainment. Those people who are life of the party, da 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 da. I see right through them. These are people who are holding a lot of pain. Not all, not everybody is cheerful and happy because of that. But a lot of cheerful, happy people are holding a lot of pain. They need the cheer. They need the constant noise. You know what I mean? People who can't be alone with their thoughts. They need constant noise.
Yeah.
It's all a reaction from your childhood. So for me, I had to unpack things like, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be quiet. It's okay to not want to hang out with your pals all the time. Like just being honest with how you're feeling in the moment is something I only learned later on in life through coaching.
Yeah.
And you see, Cece, that pattern of making it about us that we develop in childhood is a pattern that we go with into our adulthood, and we never seem to even realize it's a pattern.
Yeah.
And that's what Jane is talking about, stories. So the reason why times are tough is because you have created a story that boils down to who you are.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, I've realized that's how I have actually been able to go through very tough times. And people are like, Kwani, you don't have tough times. It's because I have seen the pattern. I'm very aware. So when I start making something about me and my identity and who I am, it starts to become tough because your ego becomes invested and you start becoming defensive to life itself.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And you start closing up and contracting and becoming tough and pushing things out, you know, because it's like you're getting into a shell, like a tortoise.
Yes, absolutely.
Because you've realized, oh, I'm not safe.
Yes.
You know, these external circumstances have created a signal that you have interpreted to, I am not safe. So you
100%.
start getting deep and deep into your defense mechanism. And that's why it becomes tough times.
Yes.
So tough times are not external. It's not about the external circumstances. It's about what's going on in your head.
Yeah.
Yes. It's what's going on in your head. And there's a number of things you've said here, Caroline. We become walking, talking reactions. You're just reacting. You're not reacting to what your boss said. You are reacting because what your boss said reminded you of how your big brother made you feel that day when you were 13.
Yeah.
You're not reacting to what your wife is saying today. You're reacting because what she said reminds you of how your mother, you know, also never listened to you. And therefore, We are just constantly being re-triggered.
Yeah, exactly.
New triggers are rare. Completely new triggers are rare. We're constantly triggered.
Yeah.
Jane,
That's
what are your thoughts?
You know, Sissy, it's so interesting. What both of you have said is so true, because we keep replaying. So I'll give you an example. I'm in class. I'm actually now even a coach. I'm doing a training session for this organization, and a lady asks me a question. And honestly, an honest question, she didn't understand. And while I stood there, what I heard her is questioning what I was saying rather than wanting a clarification. And for a moment, I got triggered because it went back to my mom. She questioned everything I did or everything I said. And, you know, I had to pinch myself to remind myself, that's not my mom.
That's not my mom, this is a client.
This is a client. What? I had to pinch myself to
I
remind
love
myself.
that, Jane. You're just being honest, because you're constantly triggered without awareness. You make it
awareness.
Yeah. I love that. Carry on.
And I remember one time also, Sissy, was my best friend, you know, the lady we lost, Fatuma, our friend.
Yeah.
We were sitting in your house, and I don't know whether it was you or Fatuma who said, you know, Jane, I can tell when you spent time with your siblings. And I'm like, why? Because you seem to be triggered. When we meet, we can tell there's just something going on there. Yeah. And I was like, what? And, you know, Caroline, I went through a session with Sissy, and I got to see, based on where I was in my childhood, you know, and I thought I had dealt with it. No, I was still looking for some level of acceptance. And when I didn't get it, I'd come out triggered. You see, you can't trigger something that does not exist. Now I got to, you can't trigger something that does not exist. It already is there. Yeah. So it had nothing to do with them. It was always about me and what I had made it mean about myself. So all the things, we keep replaying them, you know. Yes. Somebody says something, and you know how we'll say, you know how he made me feel. And I used those words very many times, Sissy. Yeah. Today I'm like, how is the person able to make me feel anything?
And it's also valid, right? Like when people are talking about it, you could actually let it could pass even in a session.
Yes.
Like I have seen even counselors asking, so how did he make you feel?
Yes.
And you go on and on and on.
So today I look back, nobody makes you feel anything.
Yeah.
People say what they say, they do what they do. The meaning you create, and that's the story I talk about.
Yeah, that's a story.
Feel. That's a story.
It's a story that makes you feel. It's the thoughts that make you feel.
Yeah. And here's the thing, ladies, and thank you so much, Jane, for sharing that story. Let me share a story from my marriage. So my husband and I, when we were first dating, so Cece isn't feeling very worthy. Cece feels like so many people that I am worthy when I achieve. I am worthy when I am winning. I am worthy when I'm successful. And I meet my husband. He was my boyfriend at the time. And my friends used to laugh. They were like, Cece, this guy is always on gear 6. What is going on with your boyfriend? He's always on gear 6, right? It's always so smooth for him. Now I look back and I can see that used to really trigger me. Why? Because Cece's story is, we must grind, we must work hard in order to receive the rewards of life. How can you be sleeping in? Bro, that's not acceptable. And he's looking at me like, what are you talking about? You know, I laugh with my husband, Stefan, for the listeners. I laugh with my husband and I'm like, man, this guy, and even my friends are like, Cece, this dude, the things he has put up with you. but that is one that stands out the most, because as I talked about in the intimate relationships episode, there are some things I did not learn through coaching or being coached. I was taught by my intimate relationship. It was my husband who held that mirror up to me and went, he didn't say the words, but through who he was being, I was able to see I need to go back to my childhood, retrace the steps, figure out when I stopped feeling worthy, why I felt I had to work hard to grind away to feel worthy, because here is a human being right here in front of me who doesn't live that life. I mean, my husband is committed, he's consistent, he's responsible, but he's one of the few people I know who doesn't kill himself for success, which so many of us do. And I realize it's because he feels worthy regardless. So I had to learn that. I know, Jade, right?
Yeah. That one.
We should immortalize him in a museum somewhere.
Yes. That one is that one is a story for another day.
That's a story for another day. And so, dear listeners, please don't miss the point we're making here. You will remain stuck in a state of constantly being re-triggered unless you unpack it in a safe container like therapy, coaching. And this is also how you find yourself repeating the same mistakes. You've been married once, it didn't work out. Now you're in your second marriage, it's not working out. The third, the fourth, you're
Same thing.
The repetition with, why don't my friends da 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 da? Why do I keep landing in jobs that da 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 da? It's because you're not getting that you're constantly being re-triggered, and you need to look at what's going on for you. This is the harsh but beautiful reality that we discussed in episode 1. It's about you. Carolyne, any additional thoughts around this? Hard times.
Yeah, as I was talking, I had mentioned that there are 2 ways I have found myself going through hard times. So the first one I talked about was being in that moment and realizing in this moment, this is hard, And the second way being, I'm looking at it in retrospect. I'm like, how did I go through that?
Yeah.
And I realized we need to appreciate our defense mechanism also. Because it helps us survive. Some of the emotional experiences we have as children, we would not survive had we been fully present to that.
Yeah.
And to an extent, our mind had to sort of remove us a little bit.
Yeah, to protect.
It's called dissociation. Yeah. It's like you dissociate. So it's like something is going on, but a part of you is not really present. It's like you're robotically going through the times.
Yeah.
And then when that season passes, you settle back down in your body.
Yeah.
And this is why it's so important to do the work, because most people did that. They dissociated.
Yes.
So they still feel that thing has no impact on them, because either they can't remember or they don't think it had such an, like in that moment, they don't feel it had an impact, but it did. And the way your system is organized, you're going to one day settle back into your body.
Yeah.
And sometimes your body has become so sick from all these things that you are not present to, because you need to be present to it and actually process it.
Yes.
Because it goes into your very cells, into your organs, all this trauma we go through.
Yes.
So I remember when I got my child, because I got my firstborn when I was 19. I got pregnant when I was 19. I got him when I was 20. And there was a season I was not present.
Yeah.
But when I look back and I start to narrate my experience to myself, how at some point I moved to a single room, we were sleeping on the mattress with him on the floor.
Yeah.
I didn't have someone to take care of him. When I tell myself everything I went through, I'm like, was that me? Like, is that my story?
Yeah.
Because it feels like such a tough life, but it didn't feel like that at that moment.
Yeah.
But now when I start to narrate it to myself, I start feeling my body feeling a certain emotion. And that's how I know that it was hard.
Yes.
Because I can feel the pain, I can feel the grief, I can feel the sadness. And that's why it's important to feel it all. Otherwise, it just eats you up from the inside.
It does. And for our listeners, don't miss what Carolyne said. Dissociation will help you get through, because let's be real, there are some really rough things people go through. Yeah, whether it's assault or, just some really, refugees. I've coached people who come from refugee families. So dissociation helps you in the moment, but eventually you do need to come back and process it. And you need to do it in a safe container. You need to do it in a safe container. The other thing I also wanted to just alert our listeners to is, when you hear coaches like us talking about energy work, alternative modalities, I don't even know why they're still called alternative, but alternative to Western allopathic medicine, acupuncture, acupressure, network chiropractic, meditation, Ayurveda, TCM, all these modalities recognize that your body is being affected by what is happening. It's not just your brain, right? Your body is being affected by what is happening. And my understanding, based on conversations I've had with nutritionists, for example, is your body chemistry gets affected. Your body chemistry your thoughts, your emotions, your experiences, the narratives, all that stuff, the mind, body, spirit connection. It's so real. And so for those listeners who still don't understand what are all these hippie things sometimes people talk about, I want to invite you to do some research, because this stuff is so real. When you are distressed in your mind, you are also distressing your body. And that's why, and even something uncontroversial like massage, the reason you feel so relaxed after a massage is not talk therapy, but it's because the body is being treated. Now, let me ask you this, ladies. So we're still on the childhood, but let me ask this. What do you realize now was the purpose of some of those things you went through as a kid? Because we're asking the question, what is the point of all the tough times anyway? Like, why is it designed this way? And I use that word design very intentionally. Jane, I'd love to hear from you. What was the purpose of all that when you were a kid? What do you realize now about those tough times?
It's, for lack of a better word, it's like I was being taken through a school for which lessons I was going to use much later in life.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So it was an education.
It was education right through. Because when I look at some of the things I felt I went through as a child, today when I have a coaching session, I really resonate with what they're talking about. It's something I identify with, and I'm able to work through, help the person work through that.
Yeah.
I get to see some of the beliefs that I held, and we say beliefs are formed from what time you're born to about 7 or 8 years of age, and the rest you're just building on. I get to see how those beliefs had held me back. Those beliefs made me see myself in a certain way, didn't give myself permission to experience life. So the lessons for me are, those things needed to happen. Honestly, I don't even believe my life would have been this way if I had not gone through what I have gone through. I look at, the pain I went through, or at least that time I felt it was so much pain.
Yeah.
And now I look at it and I say, oh my God, had I not experienced that, would I know what I know today?
Yeah, you would.
Would I be here? Yeah. Would I be here? Even this session today, would I be on this call today with you guys? No. It's because of that schooling, that education that has, and by the way, for all listeners, it is not easy. So don't make it look, I don't want to make it look like it's been an easy journey.
Yeah.
It hasn't been. It has taken up and down,
Yeah. And that's the reason, Jane, why some people just decide to be in denial. Because, opening that can of worms for some people is, it could completely upend the lives they've created now as adults.
Oh yes. When I'm coaching, somebody will say, no, I don't want to say that my mother hurt me. No, I don't want to go there. And you can hear that because they don't want to open that kind of worms. They're too scared.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, we are not here blaming your mother.
Yes.
I like what you said, Sissy. Have we even taken, I did, thank God. I took time to find out my mother's childhood.
Yeah.
And that just helped me understand where all this was coming from.
Yeah.
But you see, we are so scared because we never want to look like we are criticizing our parents, what they did, how they raised us.
Yeah.
Really, it's not about that. When hurt people are bringing you up, they are likely to hurt you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not something they do consciously, you know.
Yeah.
When people are in pain, they'll pass on their pain to you.
Because it's a blind spot.
It's a blind spot.
Yes. For our listeners, how do you get to a place? We talked about this in the parenting episode. All our unusual conversations are linked. We talked about it in the parenting episode, how to become the kind of person who doesn't criticize your parents. It's through doing the work on self, understanding the why of it all. Understanding the why of it all.
When I stood in my mom's space after I spoke to her,
wow.
I remember holding her and crying, and I said, how did you do it?
Yes.
How did you do it? How did you even manage? And we both
in a time where there was no podcast.
No podcast.
Let me listen to a podcast.
Personal development work. There was no
Yeah.
So I just asked her how she did it. And you know what was so beautiful about that is after that moment, any time I went out for a session, if it was something, even when I did some work with Westgate, Garissa, all that, my mother felt everything I was feeling when I was going through it. We became so connected on that because there was no more blame, because we had laid everything on the table. I was able to tell my mother what I felt as a child. But I got to see that pain, where it had brought me to. Do you know, Sissy, I was able to help my mom also go and forgive her mother, or rather have that session with her mother where there was no more pain, no more whatever. Yeah. So I can say this, that this work, when you now go through it, when you allow yourself to go to that place which everybody fears going into, that area where you're going to uncover and unveil all that pain, it helps you even build better relationships. Because there's nothing hidden. We are able now to just be free about how we talk.
Yeah.
I saw my mother go through that journey with her mother, and that was for me amazing. So those are 3 generations.
Yeah, a really powerful experience. And again, remember when we talk about life purpose in the previous episodes, where we were saying you're just here to have an experience. Some people will experience it differently. Like for me, I say to a lot of my clients, have that respect for your folks, because they might not want to go to those places. Your experience might not end up quite like Jane's and her mom's and her grandma's did, but that's not right or wrong, good or bad. It's just an experience. But I love what you're saying, Jane, because it's the difference between remaining closed in that protective shell that Carolyne talked about versus remaining open. Remaining open, because a lot of magic can happen in life when you remain open. And by magic, I just mean a lot of remarkable, unexpected things can happen. So for me, for example, even just this job, I never thought I'd be a business owner, and I certainly never thought I'd be doing the work I do in leadership and wellness and working with, really cool people, having meaningful conversations. I thought I'd stay in the corporate world forever, be some corporate queen. But remaining open is what made me realize, oh, wow, I want to do something else. Let me take what I've learned. Let me turn my sensitive nature into a source of power, because it does help when you're a coach to be a sensitive person, to be able to pick up things. So remaining open offers so many opportunities. Now, let me just shift the conversation, ladies, before we wrap up. What about the challenges as an adult? Because remember what we said in previous episode, there's an obstacle up ahead with your name on it. That's how this thing called life is designed. The challenges we face as adults, and again, I think we all agree that it's all for the sake of your education and your elevation. You know, so for me, the challenge that makes most sense to talk about is the miscarriage I went through. My husband and I had a miscarriage before we had our first daughter. And well, actually, my daughter is my I call her my second born, because I do acknowledge that there was a child that was lost. And that tough experience gave me a gift that nothing else has given me. And like I shared in a previous episode, it's first of all the thing that humbled me and made me realize not all problems can be solved by the intellect. I can look back and say, because my business was going so well and I was so happy and my intellect and my creativity had brought me to that place, it was just a really necessary shock to my system. And I remember one of my coaches saying, you know, CC, when it comes to things like health, having children, it's not mathematics. There's other stuff that comes in. Your brilliant mind is not going to be able to help you there. And we know people in this situation, you know, they super smart people who are having a challenge that they cannot outthink themselves out of, right? And so the lesson is, what else? What else is here for me? And for me, what else came out of the answer to what else is, it brought me into my feminine. Losing a child brought me into my feminine. If you follow the trajectory of my coaching practice, it was then that I started running women's only events after the miscarriage. And then I realized, let me also start running events for men only. I shared my story on the Engage platform. For those who are overseas, Engage is a local Kenyan platform similar to TED and TEDx. And wow, I mean, so many people have viewed that talk, and people have actually come to me and said, you know, I had a miscarriage, but because I listened to your talk, I didn't panic. You know what I mean? So there are just some lessons you will not learn any other way. Carolyne, I'd love to hear, if you're comfortable, to share some of the challenges in adulthood and what have they helped you discover and understand now.
Wow, for me, like what we were saying, how all this is tied to purpose, let me put this in perspective, that we are aspects or images of God, like the good book tells us, or, you know, like spirituality, people who are in different religions, we know that we are fragments of God experiencing itself, herself, himself on this dimension. And we have lost that perspective. So it's like you have forgotten who you really are. You have forgotten your true self.
Yeah.
And you're here masquerading as somebody else other than yourself. And that is going to generate certain results. Because if it's like, let's imagine, for example, the prince has gotten amnesia and he's forgotten that he's a prince, and then he gets lost and find himself in Kibera.
Yeah.
You know, he will live like somebody in Kibera. Like, he will have that same mindset. He'll be like, I don't have food, I don't have a house, I can't do this, I can't do that. And his life will turn out a certain way because of who he has believed himself to be.
Yeah.
And so until he awakens to who he really is, then his experience is going to remain like that. Yeah. So for us here, the experiences that we call tough times are experiences that are going to show us who we have pretended, quote unquote, who we are pretending to be, and is going to be giving us consequences of that pretense, so that we can awaken to the truth of who we are. So it's like, as a result of thinking I am not abundant, this is the scenario I'm creating.
Yeah.
Then I have to experience that that scenario. right? And then the scenario might shake me awake so that I can say, no, 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 this is not who I am. And take on a higher version of myself. And it continues and continues until I unravel all the lies I have told myself about who I am. So it's like, for me, the tough times are unraveling the lies, misconceptions, misperceptions I have about who I really am. And one time that really knocked me off, and I totally feel like I woke up a totally different person. It's like I did work for centuries. Was the experience of because it would get worse. Yes, the depression I experienced in my adulthood, it like unraveled so many layers, and it would get worse instead of better. So the way it started out with an anxiety attack, and then I went to hospital and I started psychotherapy. And the psychotherapist was like, you're not getting any better. Let me send you into the psychiatrist. I went into the psychiatrist and I was medicated. A few weeks after starting the medication, I became suicidal. A few weeks after my increased dosage and more psychotherapy session, I became psychotic. And it's like, when I went into that hospital, I was totally losing myself. This persona that I had created, that had brought me to this point, was dying. And it was in hospital.
Let me ask you, Caroline, what was your life like before then? Were you like a super busy, juggling 1,000 things person, and that's why you had the anxiety attack? What was the persona that was shattering apart?
So it was a culmination of this identity that I had created for myself. Remember, we talked about from childhood. So with these high expectations from my parents, I learned that the way to get out of trouble and the way to get acceptance and approval was to be good, very good at everything that I did. So I achieved and achieved and achieved. So at the point when I was crashing, I was at the height of my achievement as I had imagined it, because I was heading an operations department in a huge construction company. I had decided that I was feeling, you're at the height of your career and you're just feeling unfulfilled. And I was like, let me try my hand in business and see whether it's the 8 to 5 that's the problem. So at that particular point, I had left employment and I was doing my business and it was doing well. I used to send secondhand kids' clothes and I was sending them to, bills upon bills to Kitale, Eldoret. It was doing really well. I had a shop on Moy Avenue. I was doing very well. So I can say that at this particular point, it's like you have been building this house of cards and you just placed the last card. And now it has to come down.
Yes. Oh man, and so many times we do that.
Because you're not. Because it's this thing of, am I deserving? Exactly, you're surviving. And you're doing everything you can to survive. And you remember, underlying everything is your sense of, I don't deserve this. I am not worthy of this. So it's like a whole cover up. And the whole thing comes crashing down so that you can actually see that you have this belief. Because, and these are the tough times. They come to show you your limiting beliefs about who you are, about what. Because the tough times, as I said earlier, it's not the external circumstance. It's a story going on in your head. So for me, it crashed. And I woke up one day after I had stopped my medicine. And the first question was, what the hell am I doing here?
Who am I? What am I doing here?
Who am I? Like, why am I even here? Why am I struggling to achieve? For what?
It's such a slap in the face when, and I know a lot of listeners are gonna hear this. It's happened to me, it's happened to Jane, it's happened to Caroline. It's such a slap in the face when you do everything the world tells you to do. You are that success. and you get there
Mhm.
and it's empty, and you're like,
Imagine.
oh my
There's
God,
nothing else to
now
chase.
what? Now
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
I did everything you told me to do. Now what?
Yeah.
Just so
You've been played.
you've been played. This is why I say God has a sense of humor. And just for the listeners to understand, when Caroline is talking about you're having this quote unquote tough time so that you can be shown who you really are. Let me break that down. How many of us have been shocked at how creative we've become after a tough time? How loving we've become after a tough time. When a nation goes through a tough time, two things happen. People become more mean and more afraid, but there are also those people who become more loving, more welcoming, more receptive, more open, more kind to one another. The pandemic was a tough time. A lot of people became gentler, kinder to themselves. A lot of people are hanging out with their kids more and have decided, well, the pandemic is over, but we're still not taking our kids to school. We're going to homeschool them. So just so that the listeners can understand, this is what we mean when we say you're being shown that there's a part of you, the real you, that is being hidden away by the shell you created when you were younger. You are not this uptight, mean, nasty person. That is not you. We become those sorts of people when we're scared. We become those sorts of people when we are in survival mode. Jane, you and I have had so many conversations about this where we've talked about, hey, listen, when your purse gets snatched, that is somebody in survival mode, man. Just let it go. Let the purse go. Don't try and chase them down and get hurt. Let it go. I remember when we were robbed in the house I live in now. Somebody broke in. And of course, I was very distressed at that time. But let me tell you what made my husband and I laugh. Now, we had lost our computers, and that is that is also a slap in the face, because you realize I thought my whole life was in my computer, but now my computer is stolen and I'm still here. So I guess my life is not in my computer. My life is not in my phone.
Yeah.
So our computers were stolen, but my husband and I laughed because they left his Armani watch. And we laughed and we were like, wait, they've left the watch? And immediately we realized, listen, these are people who are just stealing stuff that they can boost. Boost meaning you snatch and sell.
Yeah.
They're just people who need money. And for my husband and I, who do things like traveling and this and that, man, we let go of that thing so fast. And that is the reason why we continued to live in the apartment we live in, because we got the deeper lesson. We don't need to move house. We're not now feeling unsafe, rah, rah, rah. No, it's just, listen, I actually didn't put a padlock on the door like I was supposed to, like we normally do. So also I take responsibility there. But it's just that deeper understanding. Look, this is a quote unquote developing country. This is what they call Kenya. That's a whole other story, because I have doubts about that. There's a lot of money floating around in this country. But anyway, is this somebody who needs money? They've broken in, they've taken what they've taken. They couldn't boost the Armani watch. And what they could boost: the cameras, the phones, things that they could sell and get cash really, really fast. So the tough times, dear listeners, can be transformed or transmuted into a gift. And it's not easy. I'm not saying, yeah, it was great being robbed. No, it wasn't. But if you go into it, if you dive into it with this mindset, the tough times stop being just irrelevant, random, unfortunate things that happen, and they start being some of your greatest gifts.
Yeah.
Jane, what about you? Tough times in adulthood. You've talked openly about, you got divorced, etc., etc. What have the tough times shown you? Tough times in adulthood.
I think one of the ones I can speak, there've been many.
There's been many.
Where I was auctioned, left with barely anything, my clothes and my books. I pleaded for my books not to be taken. And I don't have a house. I lost my business premises as well. Didn't have anywhere to live. I bumped in somebody's house on the floor for 2 months.
Yeah.
And that was a tough time. That was a really tough time for me because I saw everything just crash in front of my eyes. And I was like, I didn't understand. And I had been conned by someone and we ended up at the police. It never helped. But the day, when I started my healing now, let me say this, one of the things I remember doing is going to the police station and saying, I'm withdrawing the case. I no longer want to, I'm no longer interested, because by then I discovered that the police were being paid by the other person not to chase him, whatever it was. Yeah. And I remember going to Langata. I'll never forget, it was a Tuesday, and I went to Langata Cemetery and I had my funeral, everything, because when I'm going through something, I write a lot of little papers. I write letters to God. I'm one of those people who writes Dear God letters.
Yeah.
So I took a box and all the things I'd written about that whole issue, and I went to the cemetery. And I remember, as I found another funeral going on, and I left my box there and I cried my heart out. And I thought I was done.
Yeah.
For 2 months, I thought, I thought, yeah, that was, I buried it, I finished. But after 2 months, I started feeling there's still something there. I don't know what snapped in me, but I just felt I can't deal with this. Yeah. That's when the few things, I got my books, I took them to a friend's place and I told them, please keep them for me. Guys, I left the country. I went away for a year.
Yeah. You went to South Africa, right?
I went to South Africa, yes.
Yes.
And with all the things I thought I was going to be able to do, I wasn't able to do anything. It was really tough in South Africa. But that's where my lesson came.
Yeah.
That is when I got to that place of total surrender.
Yeah.
To a point where, I had to listen. I had to even listen to myself. Because before that, I was just running. I just didn't want to be anywhere that was reminding me the pain. Yeah. In South Africa, there was nowhere else to run.
Yeah.
And I had to listen to myself. And I had to come to the point of, what was I meant to learn from all this experience? What was there for me?
Yeah.
And I realized, as I surrendered to this, and I said, because at some point, Sissy, much as I had said, it's okay, I'm done with this, I'm not going to pursue the case. Oh, you can imagine what I used to say. Even when I prayed, I would say, God, let your will be done. But then I would finish, let your will be done my way.
Yeah. Let your will be done.
Let your will be my will.
How it should be done.
Yes. I needed him to be punished.
Pause the tape there, Jade, because you've said something so important. How we pray with agendas.
Yes.
You're telling God to align his will to your will.
Can you just align it so that it's looking the way I want it to look? And dear listeners, that is when your prayers don't get answered. Because some of us are feverishly praying, but the prayers are not being answered. I want to invite you to consider you're coming to the Almighty, whatever you call it, God, the force, the universe. You're coming with your agendas, and that means it's not an authentic prayer.
Mine was, let your will be done, but my way. I needed that guy. But when I got to that place of surrender my right to punish.
Yeah.
And I took responsibility because I also didn't do my due diligence. I'm getting a business I do not have any idea about. I'm sinking the only money, all my lifetime savings right there, and it was at a time, it was just after the post-election violence. So here I am now. Everything I put aside, business came down, crashing down. I had so many contracts. They were all, canceled because of what happened in the country. And here I am feeling all this. So when I gave up my right, when I surrendered my right to punish, and I said, you know what? I keep talking about starting over. When I coach people, I say starting over. How do you start over with everything that you had? Some things I've got to give.
Yeah.
some things I've got to.
It's not a starting over.
Yes.
If you're still,
Yes,
how is it
it's a
starting over and you
variant.
still have old
it's
stuff?
not.
Yeah. If
So
you
when
still have old stuff, it's just a version,
yes,
a variant,
it's a version.
a
So
remix
when I
of
got
the original.
really a remix,
Yeah.
when I said now it's starting over, and I cannot start over with all this baggage of all the pain and all the anger I'm feeling about this. I've got to allow myself to let it go. In fact, it was hurting me more than it was hurting the other person, you know. And when I finally let it go, I got to see that if I'm going to start over, actually, I created space for me to begin something fresh, to come from a space where now all these things that happened were all essence. Like I said earlier, it's like more schooling. It was very expensive, Sissy and Caroline schooling.
Oh,
It was
yes.
very expensive on
Yes.
my life, on my everything.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know what? Today, when I look back, I wouldn't change it for anything.
Yeah.
It's taught me so many lessons.
And what
But
an
it was
adventurous life. And what an adventurous life. You know, as you were talking, Jane, I was laughing because you know how you said you went off to South Africa, and for our
yes.
listeners who've never been to South Africa, it is such a beautiful country. I mean, the
Mm.
topography, all that stuff. But it's like what Caroline was saying. It's not external, it's internal. You will run to the beach and still
Yes.
be distressed. You will
Go
run
and have a tough
marine.
time in a
Yeah.
nice place.
You'll
Yes.
have a tough time in a
In
beautiful
a nice
place,
place.
but it will
I
still
like that.
be it will still be a tough time. And
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
ladies, this is the reason why one of the lessons I learned, because I'm good at making money. I like making money, and I have to keep humbling myself, because having a lot of money, and we have gone through a season as a globe, we have gone through a season as a planet where we have really deified, you know, billionaires and multimillionaires, and it's become too much about the money, the money, the money. But here's the thing that I'd love our listeners to understand. Having a lot of money can mask the house
Yes.
cards that you have built.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you're in a difficult marriage, but we are swanning around all over the world and it's all looking amazing, you're masquerading the tough times. And this is why
Exactly.
this is why people get shocked when celebrities take
Yeah.
their own lives, because you have seen the Instagram account and you think it's all wonderful, but no, the
Because
money,
there's money.
yeah, the
You know,
money
guys,
was
Sissy,
masquerading. Let me just allow me to finish, Jane. The money was masquerading the calling you were being invited
Yes.
to participate.
yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jane. You wanted to say something. Thank
It
you.
was actually Caroline.
Oh, was it Caroline?
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead, Caroline. Go
It
ahead.
was me. Yes, I was saying the Bible, there's a scripture that says that it's hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
Like it's like a camel going through an eye of a needle.
Yes.
And you know, when we talk about the kingdom of heaven, it's that really authentic bliss and peace that comes from actually shedding all these personas and all this pain and thoughts that come with that. And
say that
it's
again,
exactly what you're
Caroline.
saying.
Say that again, Caroline, because a lot of people have misunderstood that sentence.
Yeah.
A lot of people think, no, I'm supposed to be broke because the Bible says, no, ladies and gentlemen, no. Say that again, Caroline. What do we mean by kingdom of heaven?
The kingdom of heaven is that eternal bliss that comes from knowing and stepping into who you really are.
Yeah.
Which means you'll have shed off all the personas, shedding off all the thought patterns that come with that, and the emotional patterns that come with these fake personas that we have. And you step into your true, authentic self, full awareness of who you are as a child of God, as a child of the universe, as an aspect of the all that there is. That is the kingdom of God. And that's why the scripture says it's so hard for a rich man to get there, because of exactly what you're saying. It's very easy to mask.
It's very
with all
easy
these
to
material
mask.
things.
Yes, and money actually amplifies your issues. For those of you who are listening, if you think all your insecurities will disappear if you just got a higher paycheck, I promise you, take it from 3 coaches, that's not what happens. Your insecurity amplifies. If you were a generous person when you were broke, you will remain a generous person when you're wealthy. So we have also confused the role of money, and a lot of people are having tough times that are related to money, but we have confused money's role. Money certainly provides you with the basic necessities. You can take your children to school, you can pay for your hospital bills. All these things are so important, but it is not the thing that brings you that bliss.
No, it doesn't.
It's
just
not
great experiences.
Yes, lovely experiences, true, but it is not the thing that creates that bliss. Well, ladies, what an amazing conversation. Before you go, let me just ask, in summary, what would you like to leave our listeners with? Jane, what is the point of the tough times? How should we engage with them? How would you summarize it?
I would say tough times come to teach us lessons. Honestly, and the first time I heard that, I was like, I don't think I needed the lessons. And I was like, why can I not just not have any of this? But really, they do.
Yeah.
And if you're able to acknowledge the heart and acknowledge the pain you're going through, list out all your grievances and all, go through all these things. And if you can engage a coach, a therapist, whoever it is, I can promise you, at the end of it all, you'll see the gold or whatever it is you were meant to mine from that pain. Because there's always something you mine from that pain. Always.
Yes, always.
But you've got to take that. Yes, but you've got to take time to do it.
Yeah.
Yes, it may not be as easy as I'm speaking about it now, but please. And when you surrender your right to punish the other person for what what you assume or what you presume that he did or she did, or how they made you feel because they're not able to, I promise you, your life, you'll give yourself permission and have some level of freedom to live your life in your terms.
Thank you so much for that, Jane. What about you, Carolyne? What is the point of it all? What do you want to leave the listeners with? Tough times.
Yeah, I know when we are going through tough times, we just want it to stop. We want a resolution. We want the right to stop now. And most of the time we are looking externally for that stop button or that person. It's like you're on a roller coaster and you're screaming at the person you paid down there to stop the ride that you paid for. And and it's really, remember that it's an internal process.
Yes.
Whatever times that you're going through, whether it's emotional, physical, material, spiritual, whatever it is, look within. Ask yourself, what am I telling myself that is actually making it so hard? Because that's where to look.
Yes.
And if you can learn to look there and actually be very vulnerable with yourself and very authentic about the stories that you're telling yourself in that moment, then you have the power to change your experience of that moment. So it's important for you to accept that external circumstances are co-created. Most of the time we cannot change what is already happening. Because there are so many factors that are at play, many people, many forces, many, all these things. So you can't change the external thing that's happening. So look within so that you can change how you experience the experience, so that you can get the most out of it. And you can step out of that season more empowered, more
Yes.
compassionate, more loving of yourself and others.
Absolutely. What I would add is, simply put, the tough times are well, the whole experience of life, tough times and otherwise, but the tough times in particular are here to help you elevate. This is what I know now for sure. And if you don't look at the tough times that way, you increase your chances of just being stuck. You're constantly feeling stuck and nothing is working. And as Carolyne and Jane have said, looking outside when really you need to look within. And what I will also add is this: we started by talking about childhood, but there are so many people around the world whose philosophies include past lives, reincarnation, and I certainly believe in that stuff. And interestingly, if you, for example, ask yourself, okay, this has been a great talk, you three coaches, but how would you explain a baby going through a tough time? And for me, the answer that makes the most sense is this answer of reincarnation. And what that is about is, you've had past lives, you did certain things, you're just paying for some of those things now, but you also did some awesome things in past lives, which is why you're enjoying the benefits now. I mean, it's so deep. But at the end of the day, whether you believe in reincarnation or not, whether you believe in God or not, if you can go into tough times believing that, okay, this is here to teach me something, it doesn't make it easy, but it makes it easier to navigate, because the tough times become even tougher when you're fighting against it and you just don't know why it's happening, and you quickly get into victim mode, and now you're looking for people to blame, and that just makes it worse. Thank you so much, Jane, Carolyne. It's always so good talking to you. I feel so bad when we have to stop the conversation, but hey, we will have more conversations. And thank you so much, dear listeners. We will keep you posted on that live session. We would love to hear from you. We would love for you to ask us questions. In the meantime, if you haven't already, check out the previous episodes, because there's a lot of gems in there as well. We looked at intimate relationships, we looked at parenting, we looked at life purpose from this unusual perspective. Jane, Carolyne, thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Jane.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.